This week on New to You, What happened? What happened? Part 4, The Strokes. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the New to You Show. We are a preview premiere podcast for putting people to recommend. We are a podcast where we recommend things to people, whether they are brand new, which they usually aren't, or a little bit older, but they might be brand new to you, and heck, they're mostly brand new to some of us.
Yeah.
And, or heck, you also have just recently watched them. Parker, I'm losing I'm losing the thread.
What happened?
What happened?
What happened to you, John?
I lost the thread, Parker. Right. So, speaking of Parker, I'm one of your hosts, John Holt. With me,
I'm one of your other hosts, Keith Vincent.
I'm your other host, Julian Cage, and with us today,
Parker.
All right. So, we've gone through a whole bunch of what happened, and now we're going to roll into Parker's pick. Go for it, man.
What I'm going to discuss is the Strokes.
The band, not the medical condition.
The band.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm wary to. The what happened thing is tough because it depends so much on taste, and I think it's sort of unfair to.
I mean, our taste is impeccable. So, at this point, like, you're kind of put yourself
It
in
goes
the gold.
without saying.
You're in the ivory halls here, and what we say is fact and truth. So, just stand on your pulpit and speak the truth.
My point being, it's a little unfair sometimes to slap the what happened thing on somebody because I think what happens are a little bit contagious, and one critic or commenter or fan says what happened, and everyone...
And on this show, we can really make or break people. And that's the kind of power we have.
Well,
so be careful.
Well, what I'm
careful.
saying is I think that with the thing that I've chosen to discuss this week, that's happened to a degree. There was some critical consensus that what happened, and that now this band has an obligation to return to some former glory or will never return to some former glory. And I think that happens with a lot of people. I mean, Weezer is another thing that crossed my mind, but I just didn't even want to go there.
We've discussed Weezer on this podcast before.
So there you go.
A lot.
Yeah, so there you go.
We kind of wonder what happened.
Is This It was the big one that came out in 2001. Part of that whole rock revival thing that happened around that time, I guess, slightly is backlash to the intense boy band, Max Martin-y, Britney Spears-y sound of the late 90s. Not all of those bands have endured. The Strokes were certainly, even at the time, one of the most interesting of them, of the bunch. Made a huge impression on me as a just preteen at that point, and then as like a teenager when I started listening to them. So yeah, Is This It was the big first one, and obviously is at this point has sort of entered the canon as like a seminal modern rock record.
Mm-hmm. And what year did that come out?
2001. Shortly following 9/11.
Oh wow, just after. Okay.
They actually took the song New York City Cops off the US release because it was deemed insensitive.
Have they since re-deluxing it or anything?
Well, with the internet, you got
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it might be on a single or something, and it's on the English version.
The cover also had
Changed,
a
too.
naughty picture, and they
Yeah.
had to change it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Although, to be honest,
Oh,
I
yeah?
prefer the U.S. version. I sort of think it's more in keeping with their aesthetic overall. The butt picture with the leather thing, it has like a very sort of like, I don't know, almost Brit poppy kind
Rolling
of vibe
Stones.
to it. Rolling Stones. And it's
Yeah.
I sort of like those sort of more like blocks of color that they sort of followed later as a palette for the band. I think it works. Anyway.
Yeah.
So then with the follow-up, Room on Fire, came claims of they're just repeating themselves, like what happened already. You know, immediately there was a sort of like, what happened? This all sounds the same again. Like they aren't trying anything new. I mean, this is how carnivorous critics and the music scene can be. I guess critics of all stripes and stuff. And then for the follow-up, First Impressions of Earth, I think that's really when the what happened got even realer, because maybe they had more commercial ambitions. They really had to prove themselves after, I mean, what in retrospect was a fantastic record, but was sort of seen as a sophomore slump at the time, which is Room on Fire. I mean, I remember them on the cover of, like, I think it was New York Magazine, and having like a big, like, the Strokes make or break moment kind of headline for First Impressions of Earth. There was a lot of talk about, you know, Julian Casablancas allegedly stopping drinking, maybe some of the other members in the band sobering up. Whether or not that actually happened at the time is who knows. But one thing that's definitely certain is there's sort of like a shift in the sonic quality of the record, and I think that's sort of the most immediately apparent thing, where they're just cleaner vocals. You don't have him singing through this like sort of heavy distortion, sort of a less retro squashed tube amplifier-y sound. And then, moving on quickly through Angles, which was, let's see how many years were between these even. So 5 years, wow. So I think after the lukewarm reception to First Impressions of Earth, there was probably like a step back and an assessment of what was going on.
And isn't that also when Casablancas went and did his solo project?
Yes, Phrases for the Young, which has some great songs on it.
And that's the lead singer, by the way,
Yes.
Julian Casablancas. He went and did a solo project.
Albert Hammond Jr. also released
How
a
many
couple
people are in the
solo
band?
records. 5.
5 people?
Yeah. You also had the drummer doing the Little Joy side project. The bassist did a side project too that was, I heard a couple songs really meh. But anyway, so the band members were finding success individually, and I guess where I agree with the sort of general consensus is that a lot of First Impressions of Earth is just meh. I mean,
that's what you thought about it
this
too?
is and this is their third record.
That was my first impression of First Impressions.
So I mean, you Only Live Once is a classic Strokes, and that kicks off the record, and that's as good as anything they ever did for my money. But then you have things like Juice Box and Heart in a Cage, and you're already starting to see sort of the traps they would fall into later, where edging towards a little bit more of a radio rock sound, sort of bloated, less on the sort of like television Lou Reed, laid back New York City cool, and more on this sort of like manic, urgent, and maybe like more self-consciously like reaching for big important music. I mean, I always see it as,
and I think that's Julian Casablancas like exerting more influence, because I feel like his solo record, you know, like that's when you were like, oh wow, this guy's like, because it went in a very different kind of production-wise and sound-wise, went in a very different direction than the Strokes.
yeah.
And I think you saw his ambitions in that, and I feel like some of that came back into the Strokes.
I mean, as early as the first couple records, he was writing the majority of it.
Yeah.
But I think it's.
But you know,
I think it's I think honestly a big part of it is sort of like maybe a response to the critics who saw them sort of do the same album twice with Room on Fire, and for some reason they weren't satisfied, or the public wasn't satisfied, or it didn't commercially do as well. And the response was like, we got to go bigger, we got to clean up, we got to go shinier, we got to have crazier like what melodies or whatever it is. I think that, I guess really sort of what I'm saying, or what I want to say, is that I don't think this is really a what happened in terms of like where did they go wrong. I think this should more be looked at as like a what happened that they made these first two fantastic records in the first place. because I think that's more fair to them as artists, and I'd rather look at it in a positive light. I'm realizing now, and what they were able to do in terms of like synthesizing decades worth of underground, largely New York, some British music into like sort of a new take is pretty amazing and pretty hard to accomplish.
And even if they didn't make another record ever,
that would have
been enough.
I mean, I guess like a sort of maybe a good comparison point, just in terms of discussion about how we hear things and how we interpret things. If you take a song like Last Night off the first one, which stone cold classic.
Everybody knows that song.
I don't think there's any doubting that. But, even then there were like sort of allegations and criticisms of sort of like, stealing the riff from American Girl, the Tom Petty song, that sort of like octave opening riff. Which, I mean, I hear it. I think they're very different songs overall. And the Strokes were great at sort of interpolating other people's sounds. But that being said, if you jump forward a few years to the more recent Come Down Machine record, one of my favorite songs off that is One Way Trigger. And that did a sort of similar thing where it's kind of like jacking a riff a little bit. This one from Take On Me by Aha. And this time around, hearing like a familiar riff like that again felt cheap. And like, why didn't they notice this? And like, why... For some reason, it just didn't feel like this...
organic
assimilation and recontextualization. It felt like someone didn't catch how much this sounds like Aha. And I wonder if that has to do a little bit with me internalizing this what happened narrative. This what happened narrative, and maybe naturally listening more for what I don't like, or listening for shortcomings more so than listening for what they're doing that's good and new.
Well, it's true that if you hear a record, like because everyone's like, oh, you should check this out, it's great, versus lukewarm response, like, I don't know about this new record. Yeah, it totally influences how you listen to it.
Yeah.
Well, I have a theory about this as well, and it's something that bothers me quite a bit about music criticism in criticism in general. There's so much stock put into the new thing, the new artist, the fresh thing. Therefore, a band, and it's affected so many amazing bands, and throughout. Any band with longevity is going to suffer from this. Doesn't matter who they are. Bruce Springsteen, U2, Radiohead, Wilco, like any of these bands that have lasted more than 3 records is going to have some version of, they play the same thing over and over again, or, that record wasn't as good. And because it's just a music critic is busy trying to make their mark as being the one that discovered this thing, and therefore this band that's just putting out great stuff and continuously suddenly seems boring.
I think also music critics are listening to everything all the time, and so they want to hear new stuff.
Well,
you know what I mean?
But in their credit, it's sort of a little devil's advocate, because I do agree with you and see where you're coming from. But there is also the idea that if someone puts out an amazing record or something within a genre, and it's clear like this is the world that they want to work in, and this is the style and the tone that they have, and then their next album doesn't push those boundaries, doesn't further explore the space they're in, or doesn't really is just rehashing, and like it's clear that they've just kind of like they're running the treadmill and not like pushing themselves artistically. Like that comes across, and that can be like it.
Well, can I ask
out.
you a question? Did the Ramones
change and shift their tone?
Yes, over the career of the Ramones, other than doing a record with Phil Spector, did they ever take a chance where you were just like, wow, they're going in a different direction?
No, but that's what I'm saying. It's not not direction in that, but they didn't go in a different direction like, hey, we're going to try to be a Jamaican ska band or something. It was more like they continued to push and plumb the depths. Like they're not... One of them was musically like sound and had discipline, and he just kept everyone else at that pace and on that level. And they kept playing the same songs. They played fast, quick, simple songs, but they had a lot of room to work. Because they were playing fast, loose, and simple, there's a lot of ways that you can do that within the narrow band that they kind of exist. And what's nice about them is that they did work hard to maintain the freshness of what they were doing.
Talk about the Ramones.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. I'm gonna like disagree here a little bit. Like, I think the Ramones songs that people remember at all from their career, starting after the very early 80s, are the times where they really branched out a lot, or really did something. I mean, songs like Bonzo Goes to Pittsburgh, which was featured in School of Rock, where they're really going for a power pop, different kind of feel. I mean, even Pet Sematary, which was like a later-ish kind of hit, if you can call it that, for them, has like a much more mature, developed vibe than something like
Blitzkrieg or something.
Blitzkrieg Bop,
Right.
which I mean is brilliant. I'm just saying, but it's sort of more mature songwriter-y vibe. But I mean, what can you name off the records that Pet Sematary was on, or that Bonzo Goes to Pittsburgh was on, where they were hewing closer to their original formula? You know, in the sort of album cuts, like what's memorable about that? Nothing, because maybe it just doesn't have the newness or the impact, and it doesn't have the inspiration.
Well, I will say that with what the Ramones benefited from, I think, that the Strokes, which hindered the Strokes, it's kind of a blessing and a curse, is that the Ramones took a long while to become recognized, to kind of earn their status.
Cult status, yeah.
The Strokes came out swinging, like hit it out of the park from the first shot. Therefore, that sound was, like you said, a perfectly synthesized rock and roll sound with their own, that is strictly their own.
Yeah.
Once you've established that you can do that, then even if you, like you said, the second record is great and amazing, but everyone's just like, oh, well, I've already heard it. And it's just like, well, but it's so great, you know?
Yeah, but I mean, I think the Ramones came out the gate with a perfect established.
Certainly, but
people didn't hear it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is with the Strokes, to come up with like within the framework of a 5-instrument rock band, or 4-instrument rock band, to come up with like a sound that's fresh is nearly impossible. And it was even nearly impossible in 2001 in terms of that like guitar. I mean, post things that like Radiohead did, and post things that David Bowie did earlier on in the late 70s. I mean, like, so much guitar rock had been, the depths had been plumbed. I think someone used that phrase earlier, but like it's true. I mean, it's so hard to be inventive within that formula, and it seems like someone like the Strokes had the option of, even after Room on Fire, saying like, yeah, that's right, we did another fantastic batch of songs in the same sound, and our third record is going to be the same sound again with another fantastic batch of songs, and like, get used to it, this is our sound.
Yeah.
Or they had the option to be like, well, you know what, we can do other things too. We can branch out a little, we can clean up for the guys upstairs, whatever it is. And they chose the latter option, which played against a lot of their strengths.
But do you think that it was definitely a reaction to the critical response, or do you think it was like, oh, we're getting bored of this sound, we want to explore other things? Because it's more fun
I think
for
it's
us.
that. I think it's all of it. I think it's boredom with themselves, probably the critical response. I'm sure the commercial response and pressures from the label and stuff. They just had a sound that was like bulletproof and really worked, and it's hard to
get lightning in the bottle.
Yeah, and honestly, I think a lot of the things they've done, a lot of the stuff they've done since that stands out on their latest records is still the stuff that like hews closest to their original sound, whether it's You Only Live Once off First Impressions of Earth, Taken for a Fool off of Angles, Tap Out, I think was it Tap Out or All the Time? Maybe it was All the Time on Come Down Machine. Yeah. So, it's their comfort zone, and there is, every time you hear these songs, an element of like, oh, here's the Strokes doing their early Strokes sound, and maybe there's like a little bit of hope that
Factory,
they'd push the envelope. But like every time they do push the envelope, I feel like
there's a backlash.
there's just some of like the seam show, the limitations of what they do. And when they go, I mean, when you see like Julian Casablancas doing some of his soul stuff, or with the Voids, when he really pushes it all the way out into this like extremely different strange zone, like sometimes there are these real flashes of brilliance when he's like totally escaped like Strokes zone. But the funny thing is, like, even in Albert Hammond Jr. soul work, or Nick Valenci, the other guitarist's most recent, he just put out a record this year. Like, they all have these moments in all of their songs solo where they're like they're close to the sound of the Strokes, and they're always like the singles, and they're always sort of like the best songs, or like the most ear-catching things, and somehow still when they all get together as a band again, for whatever reason it is, pressures or interpersonal dynamics, or maybe they're just they want to hoard their best material for themselves, like you feel like, if you had brought that riff from this song that you had on this album, this hook from this song you had on this album, and Julian, if you had brought these sonic ideas from your solo thing to this, and we had all that in the pot, like
Right.
you'd have something truly remarkable. But I feel like
It's getting diluted by the solo projects.
I don't think it's even diluted by the solo projects. 'Cause I think it's more, and I've read in articles and stuff, they haven't really been shy with the fact that there's tensions at points, and that at least for the album Angles, like they were hardly, like Julian was hardly even in the studio with them,
And I feel like that's the album, the Strokes album that I heard the least about.
Yeah.
I feel like that one just kind
they
of
didn't tour behind it even, I don't think.
So I even forgot that album existed.
Yeah, I mean, I really genuinely think, like, I think there's something within them that is preventing them from working together in whatever way to make something really great again. And I thought,
You think they need like a group therapy session?
well, I think, they've been reuniting more and more frequently, it seems, to do these festival shows, probably because the money is so good. And I thought this most recent EP, while not astounding, you didn't like it at all?
I really didn't like it at all.
I thought there was a certain looseness and playfulness and pushing in certain directions at points that showed that, like, maybe these guys can get together once a year or once every couple years as a band,
But you know what?
and take up some of like this self-consciousness, self-awareness, and like self-aware pushing one way, and just sort of like be a band that plays like good rock together.
Yeah.
That's a question too then. Like, if you're that band, do you need more albums? Or are you the greatest hits band, the Strokes, who, like, Julian Casablancas and his band are going to play, and then the Strokes are going to play after that?
Well, I think your question is sort of leading into what I think is has been the final question of each of these, and is probably the rational wrap-up, which is what could they do in our imaginations that would sort of be a return to glory? And I mean, do you guys have opinions about that?
I do about the Strokes.
Yeah.
I think that they need to be a band like in the studio for a long while.
Yeah.
When you were telling me about
Like
the
Versus on the Road.
Well, no, when you were talking about the road would work too, actually. I mean, as long as they get a chance to all play together as a band, but experiment together as a band as well. And when you were saying, like, oh yeah, Casablancas wasn't even hardly in the studio with the band, I was just like, well, that's the same old story. You hear that same story with so many bands, and it's and that's when a band stops being a band. It starts being either formulaic or just we're just working on this next record until I can go back and do my own solo project. But if they, if they were to kind of like say, hey guys, we're, the Big Pink, we're going up to upstate New York. We're going to live in this house for a while. We're just going to work on a record until we can't stand each other again. I think that, when it comes to that kind of collaboration, not one of them discovered that sound on their own. They had to hammer it out, I feel like. And I don't know how long they existed before they made that first record. But
I mean, I think they were something like they were practicing and working on shit together for about a year before they played their first show even.
Right.
I think.
And see, that's the thing. That's that's a dynamic that is hard to
Yeah.
come up with once you suddenly don't have time to.
Yeah, and I mean, here's another, before I hear other people's opinions about what they could do, here's another tidbit that I forgot to mention. Come Down Machine was the last album, I believe, in their deal with RCA.
Yeah.
Hence the big RCA logo, sort of as an ironic wink, wink, funk you. Their last EP came out on Julian Casablancas' Cult Records. So
They might have more incentive now.
Maybe with the burden of an album deal with a majored record label off their shoulders, and sort of they're on their own timeline. They have entirely their own artistic control or idea about what they can put out and when, because it's Julian's label. Maybe that's sort of just open air cleansing thing they need to do things, or just sea change that they need to just do things a different way.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, I don't know. I have a hard time imagining them coming up like with a very different sounding record that I would like. But maybe that's a limit of my imagination. But honestly, if they just come out with another record that has a similar sound that just has great songs, I mean, that's really all we care about when it comes down to it. We just want to hear great songs.
Yeah,
and that we want to come back to, that catch us. like. That's all I want.
I agree.
Just do it.
Just make some great songs. Be cool. Hey guys, how hard could what's the matter with you?
Hey,
just make some great songs. It doesn't have to be more complicated.
Why are all these lonely people everywhere? Why don't they just all get together?
I mean, I think
I don't think that they'll ever reach the heights, though. I think the music, the music industry has moved on from that wave almost. So
although
I think
until very recent, I guess not very recently, but more recently than the Strokes were having mega spotlight or hits, Phoenix, who came about at the same time and whose first few records came out around the same time as the Strokes' first few records, and had a very similar sound of sort of dancey, modernized rock. They had huge breakthrough successes by introducing some more electronic and pop, and I almost feel like you hear in some of the later Strokes them almost attempting to execute the same thing, or almost like they were hearing some of that on the radio and this is
they always had more funk to them, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They were more dancey and I feel like the Strokes in a way it's both what was great and what's limiting about them is the
rock.
It was just so their sound was so defined and so specific.
Yeah.
I think that's Phoenix. You could see them play and do and try things and having it work because they were just poppier. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, we say that it's so similar, but if you take that what's the song? It goes la da 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 la da 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 da. That song sounds different than what you think of their sound. You know what I mean? And that's something that they reached very early.
Yeah.
And
that's Is This It?
Yeah. And that's the sort of thing that they can push the edges of everything and still within their wheelhouse come up with a wide variety of things.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that your thought is good, and that may be impossible in terms of just them getting together as a band because. Yeah, and your comment too about it just being great songs, because I think even if they worked within two guitars, bass, drums, didn't add any bells and whistles that they sometimes added later, and just were really playing together and writing, they could do it again, and it would feel fresh just because the production would be 20 years later or 10 whatever it is, 15 years later, and just because the songs would naturally be different and their voices are old or whatever. I mean, unless they did something drastically different.
Yeah.
And just, threw out a Kid A kind of we're really going in another, which is hard to imagine, but could people have imagined Radiohead doing it? Probably not.
No, that's true.
Yeah. I mean, my perfect scenario for them is just to disband and do their own projects, commit. If you're going to hold, if the theory that they're holding anything back has water, then make your side projects your prime projects and go out and explore new collaborations and have if you're a 5-man band, make 5 new bands that are 5 fucking awesome bands.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
just
the
do
thing
that.
is-
Like,
but
stop.
I kind of feel like
stop
they've
trying.
tried.
Stop trying
yeah.
to run the treadmill.
I don't know. I think it also
Didn't
is.
work
it's
for
a,
Kiss.
I think it's a too many. Yeah.
Too many cooks.
I think it's a little bit of a too many cooks thing, too. I mean, I don't know how much each individual has, but I know that at least from whatever reading I've done, that for the first couple records, it was dictatorship vibes via Julian, and that I'm think that was poisonous to the personal relationships in the band, probably, because you don't want someone to tell. I mean, especially as you find success and you want an opportunity to be yourself and show your own character as a musician. But sometimes what a lot of great artists with long careers have is that sort of like singular artist who has the flexibility of like changing his or her mind because they are the primary artist. And I'm not saying that should be the case with this band or that it should be Julian Casablancas, but if you look at David Bowie, Bruce
Jeff
Springsteen,
Tweedy.
Prince,
Right.
Joni Mitchell, and and that makes a band like Radiohead very unique because they still are under the band identity. But even so, even though they are the Radiohead band, you can have videos where it's Thom Yorke dancing over like an electronic drum beat and singing, and it's Radiohead.
Yeah.
Who knows how much input each of them had in the actual recording? Maybe it was a lot, but like there's a certain like relinquishing to one person of like the vision of the control or the image, and it's hard to think of bands that are bands through and through, bands that have survived without doing that. Maybe U2.
Well, I will say that U2 and the Rolling Stones.
Yeah, but they also have those characters.
Well, what I'll
too.
say, what I think makes a good recipe for a long-lasting band identity is that you have two primarily creative
Right. Because I mean,
forces.
I know they had a lot of room to explore and a lot of like co-opting of other musics to do, but the Beatles had, arguably 3 strong creative people.
More than that, but
in
when they were
But they had the
getting
two,
there,
they had
it was
the two
their
big
two.
egos
Yeah.
that were battling.
Right.
You know?
When
keeping
they
it
were
balanced.
getting there, it was Paul and John, but after a while, it became more. It became,
Paul and John and Martin.
and John.
Yeah, I think that's true about the 2 people thing, but I also think it's true. Like, if you think about the Stones, though, I mean, they had a lull in the 70s,
Oh, yeah.
and they came back big with Some Girls, and even a lot of Tattoo You is fucking phenomenal, also. And maybe the Strokes are just working through some shit, and they've got like a Miss You up their sleeve,
Maybe they need,
and you don't know.
They need to get through some disco period.
Yeah,
They just need their Animat or whatever, and they just need a dark.
Altamont.
Yeah, they needed their Altamont for their dark thing. Just need
Well,
something
no,
to
but
set
I mean,
them
that
off
wasn't-
kilter.
But
That
here's,
was-
I know.
Here's,
I'm
here's
just
something
being
else.
silly.
I feel like, though, that even though it kind of helps define the specific sound, I feel like Julian Casablancas' vocals are also kind of a limiting factor. Because I just feel like his lack of, like, I think melodically, like, he has a lot of cool ideas and all this stuff, but his range is very limited,
Yeah, and I think as the albums have gone on, he's tried to push it further and further, be more and more melodic because he has great ideas, like you're saying, and he has great ear for melody. But yeah, no, and he's done a lot of there's a lot of auto-tune. You can like audible, and like it's cool, and it's a cool effect that works sometimes. But I almost feel like here's something that I could hear. What if instead of like flirting with it at points or using it to correct things, what if, and he sort of did this a little bit on his soul stuff, but what if there was a Strokes record where it was all that distorted sound that he had on the earlier records with autotune, almost like Kanye West does?
Yeah.
Like, what if that was just full on? I mean, he could almost use his voice as a third guitar.
Well, Parker, I don't know if you heard, but Jay-Z said that the death of autotune. Autotune's dead.
Yeah, because Jay-Z's at the vanguard of pop music nowadays.
Jay-Z said that it's dead.
Well, I mean, the other option is, which a little more radical, but like, bring in another vocalist. Like why
Regina
not?
Spektor.
and not have him sing or have 2.
Or have 2.
Or have her sing.
Or have 1. But
You know what?
I mean,
Recast the
when
entire
like
band
we know
with women.
Albert Hammond sings. We know Nick Valenci sings. I think even the drummer Fabio sings.
Yeah. So I don't know, maybe.
So maybe vocal harmonies.
Yeah.
Maybe so.
Some-
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely options.
Because that was the one thing when I listened to his solo record, Julian Casablanca's solo record, I was like, he wants to be Queen.
Yeah.
You know, but he's no Freddie Mercury.
Yeah.
Like that was what was wrong with that
Yeah.
record is everything else sounded like that, but
Yeah.
his voice, you know, it was like.
Though I do like some of there's something interesting and charming about like the reach and then not quite
Yeah.
making it, especially when
Yeah.
you couple it with like these digital technologies that are trying to force it to work, and you hear the artifacts of it not working, which is why
Yeah.
auto-tune is cool. And I think like, but embrace it then.
Yeah, and that kind of makes me think of New Order because
Yeah.
they don't have great vocals, but they also tend to sing like their lyrics and stuff tend to be more like kind of innocent-y
Yeah.
or about
and they're,
love.
and they're more like a piece of like they're more instruments and not like it's not so much about the lyrics in the New Order. Like it's
Yeah.
the lyrics are important, but it's really like the pace and the way they sing
but
them.
but
is-
it's sort of like they play that like vocal limit like adds a certain level
Yeah.
like innocence
Yeah.
to it in
Yeah.
a way.
Mm-hmm.
But because they do more kind of like cool sounding kind of stuff, if you know what I mean, like it doesn't play the same way.
And it worked on the early records because it was playing. It
Yeah.
was like I'm Lou Reed, but a slightly better singer.
Right.
You know, like it's like I've got the same cool deadpan, but like I hit even more notes than Lou Reed, so you're really in for a treat. You know, like it's that like.
What if they did a couple songs with that weird kind of like rapping that Lou Reed did?
Don't do that.
Yeah,
What if
yeah.
they do an album with Metallica? Oh, Lou, rest in peace.
What about if they hooked up with Albarn from Blur? I bet you they could come up with some really neat stuff.
That's more egos, though. I mean, he.
Wait, why
He
don't they do,
collaborates
like,
really
Yeah,
well
it's
with the
true,
gorilla
yeah, yeah.
stuff.
You
He's
should just get a bunch of egos and do like a "We Are the World" on fire.
Although it is interesting to think about who could produce at this point, like work with the Strokes, that they could trust, that could get something.
David Albarn. What's his?
Yeah, Damon.
Damon. Thank
That
you.
could get something out of them.
Could you do it, Parker?
Gosh, I don't know. I'd love to try. Oh, boy, would I love to try. What an honor. I don't know. Maybe I'm giving myself too much credit because like those guys can play circles around me and stuff. But like I think I could get in there and make some positive changes. I'm not that humble.
If they listen to you.
Yeah, listen up, guys. Offers up.
Yeah, if this gets to you. I do know some people. I've known people here and there in my life who are involved with cult records and stuff. I mean, it's a very local thing. Boy, would that be sick. Yeah, cool. No one's ever going to hire me to do a structure. But I mean, I wonder who. Like,
Never say never.
I almost want to, like, I'd almost. God, who could do it? Like, I almost, it's almost too bad that, like, I mean, Kanye West has had this mental breakdown recently, which is a shame. And, like, that may never be, like, but, like, that's almost the kind of thing. Like, I almost want them, like, sort of like another visionary to kind of come in there and, like, make hard edits. Be like, actually, you know what? Just take the drums off this song. And like, just sort of like these sweeping things and, like, come in with, like, scissors and glue and, like, have director's cut over the Strokes record and, like, make them hear what it could be if they didn't have the last say, you know? And have them be like, oh, I almost have someone take all their music they made and remix it and be like, how about we put it out like this? Because I feel like that's what they need to hear.
Yeah.
And well, I think that's important to artists anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that's why
and
producers.
if for no other reason, to sometimes even have somebody's for you to get riled up and to bump heads with.
Yeah.
In that way, or like, you don't think we could do this with these kind of drums? Well, we'll show you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And,
Yeah.
and that give and take of that nature, I think,
Yeah.
is really helpful for artists.
Yeah.
I did notice that their new record, their new EP, has a remix.
Yeah, which the
I
drummer
don't-
did.
Interesting.
Yeah. The drummer did that. Yeah.
So, where can they listen to you? Spotify,
Everywhere.
iTunes, the whole shebang.
Strokes are everywhere.
First couple albums are the ones to start on. You think?
I mean, the first couple records have so many fantastic songs you can't go wrong, and there's great songs across all of them.
Actually, what I would recommend is getting on Spotify and just going Strokes play. Like, it doesn't even need a record, just hit play, and it's really remarkable. I think what we consider what happened, and this is exactly what Parker was saying earlier. What we consider what happened in like 15 years from now is just not even going to be a thing. It's just like that's the Strokes.
Yeah, shuffle play them.
Yeah.
See what you think.
Yeah, like the kids who are being born now, who are going to look back and see these guys as oldies, this is like the greatest band of all time to them.
But wait, one more thing that I wanted to is the one thing that I was planning on saying that I forgot about first impressions of Earth in terms of when things go wrong, and this is a more jokey comment, but when bands start doing things like spelling eyes, I-Z-E, in Eyes of the World, or having songs like, which I do like this song, but Electric Cityscape, all one word, where electric goes into city. I find that basically only Prince can do that in terms of those strange spellings and
Eddie
word
Murphy.
combinations. Yeah, and Eddie Murphy in that song too. But like that's basically the person who can get away with it. And pretty much every time a rock band tries to like make up their own spellings and words, it like fucking sucks.
Yeah.
And I actually do like one of those songs, but that's a bad headspace to get in where you're like, I can make up a fucking word if I want. I can put, I don't know. That's it.
So you're done with that?
That's yeah.
So watch out for that kind of stuff.
When you see that, it's a bad sign.
Yeah, it's a
Good
bad
pick.
sign.
Thanks, Parker.
I'm not Shakespeare. Thank you
Yeah.
for having me.
Dr. Seuss too.
Everybody sees me, but it's not that easy. Standing in the light field, waiting for some action, over by. Won't you come over here? Why won't you come over here? We gotta sit
To such a question, there are many possible answers, such as hard work.
Years ago, the holies are good.
Feel I'm alone in this whole of existence. I know it takes time, but I'm losing my persistence. The distance is too far to fetch. So
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to our What Happened topic. That wraps it. 4 weeks. Down and out. I was one of your hosts, John Holt. You can find me on Twitter at Lord Joho. Keith, where can people find you?
You can find me on earthlingkeith.com.
And I'm Julian Cage. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at BeautifulJules. How about you, Parker?
I'm Parker. You cannot find me on OkCupid. I do not have that one. But I have a bunch of
All
other
the other
dating
ones.
apps.
Search for Slonk Donkerson.
Throw a freaking bone to this guy.
Swipe right.
Also, but I've gone on a few dates lately, so I don't have much money. So you gotta pay.
Going Dutch.
I
Or
can't
you know
be
what?
dropping a $120 on a date anymore.
Or
It's
free
killing me.
activities. Like,
Yeah, a nice walk.
I have some activities that I would charge nothing for.
Yeah. So before we get out of here, Jules,
As a new
what
to
was
you.
new to you this week?
New to me this week, cannabis balm.
What?
Tell me.
Is that Dr. Buzz?
My masseuse hooked me up, and it's basically, it's just like, like a
happy ending?
like a nice cream, that you would put on your hands for moisture kind of thing, but it's got quite a bit of cannabis in it. And if you got, like a stiff neck or a sore shoulder and you rub that stuff on there, you feel good right away.
For real. Like
For real.
in the local
Like-
area, like it feels good where you rub it?
Like it feels like one of those cure-all magic potions. Like it gives you immediate, pain relief. And, and if you use a lot, you'll feel a little buzz too.
And you won't pass like
Where
your
do you get
federal
this?
drug exam.
That depends on where you live, and who you know.
So it's
Laws
not
are changing rapidly.
That's right.
And
But you
Obama
could
pretty much
you could
said-
make it yourself. I think you just need a lot of bud. But
in a blender.
I'm sure you can look it up on the
Birds
internet.
Wait, is it still called America or is it Bud?
I'm not sure.
I'm glad they changed it to America because it was very confusing sometimes. You're like, you kind of grab some bud and you didn't mean it.
But you didn't mean your friend who's sitting next to you.
Yeah.
Anyways, but I mean, if and I would recommend it if you have some
Soreness.
chronic discomforts.
And it can cure
Getting
like
older.
pretty serious
It's not.
illnesses.
It doesn't cure. It's a pain
Ameliorates.
reliever.
You sure it doesn't like if you have eczema or Lyme disease, just rub this all over you.
I can't hurt. You know, it can't hurt. That's
If
all I'll
you're
say.
if you're allergic to cannabis, you just rub it all over you.
I mean, whatever you're into,
That's very
man.
good advice.
Whatever
Very
you're
solid
into.
advice.
All right, Jules says do it.
I'd say, if try it, give it a try.
I wonder if they make those creams.
I'll
that are,
try
like,
anything
poison
once to bring it back to the Strokes.
Cannabis cream.
ivy. Cannabis cream.
Yeah, or I don't know. I don't know what to call it exactly, but
Is it like a product or is it just like an unlabeled bottle?
it's an unlabeled bottle. It's homemade in small batches. But I'm sure in states like Colorado, I'm sure you can go to a store
There's
and
just
buy
like a
it.
tanker full of it.
But
That's pretty
anyway,
nice.
the one I got, it's pretty good. I like it.
All right, so
He's rubbing it on right now.
I guess we'll have
Oh, yeah.
I guess we'll have a link to your local dealer. You can get some
Maybe I'll find a tutorial online on how to make it. or
cannibal cream. All right, so next week we're going to be starting a new topic, and I'm going to be up on plate first. Our topic is going to be do-gooders, and my pick is Richard Wayman, a highway safety film director, creator from the 50s. You can go check out some of his films like Signal 30 and Wheels of Terror. And there's a terrible documentary. It's okay, but it's like kind of terribly done called Hell's Highway that you can learn a little more about him. And there's a few articles out there. But Richard Wayman's who I'm going to be talking about as we go into do-gooders. So check it out. We'll also have a link to the Strokes, the musical band.
The stocks.
On our website, newtoyoushow.com. You can follow us on Twitter at newtoyoushow. You can follow us on iTunes or your favorite podcast listening device. You can also leave us a review on iTunes.
And if you're really dedicated, committed to it, you might be able to access our Facebook page.
If you try.
You may have to pay Parker to get access.
You might have to
Gatekeeper.
date him.
Yeah.
You got to pay the troll toll to get into this boys' hole.
Yes. So, gang, it may not be new, but maybe it was
new to you.
What happened? Explosion sound.
Take me away from all the troubles and the clutter of the world. Got no need for nothing, so I'm out of here. Leave me alone to myself till I figure it out. Then I'll try to explain what it's about. For now, give me time to think, cause I'm sinking in the quicksand. Been peddling too long, and I'm not a human kickstand. Need time to rest, but I gotta keep moving. This pitiful life is all about the music. 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 This pitiful life is all about the music.
With him together forever, without the limitation of time ever again. So the second coming of the Lord is not dead.